Hi everyone, hope everyone's had a great conference so far, some really great sessions on APIs and AI being a big theme as well this year. I was hoping to see how many AI agents turn up to listen to this session, but I don't see any in the audience. Maybe I'll be luckier next year, but jokes aside, I'm Shrey Pasricha, a Gartner analyst with a focus on integration and API management technologies. And as part of my job every day, I get to speak with and advise a diverse array of Gartner clients on their integration and their API management strategies, the platforms they use, the pain points that they're trying to resolve for. And I'd be remiss if I did not point out to this obvious fact that AI has steadily made its way into a majority number of those conversations. Hence, I put together this session on AI and the state of APIs in 2025. But before we get into the core theme of the session on AI and its impact on APIs and API management more broadly, it would be good to do a health check on the state of APIs as it stands. Now, according to a recent Gartner API strategy survey, 91% of organizations actively use APIs or plan to use them in the future. Now, to support this ever-growing adoption of APIs, you definitely need some platforms to manage them. And the good news is that the API management software market is demonstrating a very healthy growth rate with a predicted value of $4.4 billion US dollars in 2025 and a strong growth rate expected in subsequent years as well. Now, even in the age of AI, according to a recent Gartner software engineering survey, 59% of organizations stated that developing APIs is a key focus area for the software development teams. So it's only natural that the API management platform adoption isn't slowing down because 78% of organizations stated that they currently use API management platforms to support their business critical initiatives underpinned by APIs. But mere platform adoption isn't enough. A platform is only as good as the developers using it. And the good news on that front is that the API engineer skill set is still considered a key competency within organizations, with 42% of them stating that they aim to increase that role in the coming year, while only 9% aiming to decrease it. Now, despite the optimism surrounding APIs, the modern API landscape has become quite complex. Organizations are now juggling multiple heterogeneous API gateways from different vendors in their ecosystem, implementing APIs of diverse types, whether that's REST, GraphQL, gRPC, and let's not forget our old friend SOAP as well. And something that I see commonly coming up as well, like within each organization, now you will see multiple teams implementing and innovating with APIs, which makes API governance at scale a major challenge as well. Which brings me to this point that organizations have already invested significantly in their integration and API management strategies, kind of creating this pile of complexity that they now have to manage. Now, there's a tempting narrative out there that AI will magically come along and just erase this pile of complexity, that while AI is in play, you don't really need to worry about this mess underneath. But that's a myth. And the reality is that can lead to some real blind spots in your planning, because the actual thing is that AI brings its own layer of pile of complexity on top of the existing pile. So it doesn't really erase anything. Yes, it unlocks new capabilities, but it also introduces new layers of integration, governance, as well as risk. And the best way that I recommend that you view and rationalize this is to understand that AI and APIs basically have a symbiotic relationship. APIs are essential for the success of your AI initiatives because they help AI get access to data, trigger actions which lead to some kind of value. And as AI kind of evolves, it will be able to kind of increasingly discover and orchestrate APIs, autonomously trying to solve complex business problems. And on the other end of the spectrum, we are seeing that AI is changing the way that we build, test, manage, and consume APIs. So this symbiotic relationship is going to be essential for the success of any API strategy in the AI era. And to understand this relationship a little bit better and deeper, there are essentially three core areas that I would like to cover. How is AI impacting API consumption? How AI helps with API management? And how some of these emerging AI-specific protocols are changing the way that we look at APIs and what we do with them. Now, for the first section on AI and its impact on API consumption, let's first start with the foundational view of the API use cases. There are essentially two types of use cases that come through. You have the external use cases where you're building out APIs to expose them to external developers or partners, trying to get them to the data that they need. And maybe you also unlock some revenue streams via API monetization. The second types of use case that you see coming through are internal ones where you're developing APIs to optimize internal processes, enabling integration via APIs, or maybe even building out microservices architecture. But what's often overlooked and is highlighted in this light blue box here is consumption of third-party APIs. Now, most of API management use cases are focused on managing and securing the APIs we build, but 71% of organizations consume external APIs, and that's a part of the strategy that you do need to pay attention to. Now, we did a survey to try and find out what these APIs are that organizations are consuming, and what you would notice is that there's a huge rise in the use of AI APIs. So APIs coming from OpenAI and other LLM providers that you would utilize to build out LLM applications or AI applications or AI agents are driving up this huge surge in the use of external APIs. Now, API gateways are very much focused on managing inbound access. They don't really cater to this kind of consumption. So we are seeing the emergence of a new component in the market, which is called as AI gateways, or sometimes also referred to as LLM gateways. Now, these are components specifically designed to manage and govern this external AI API consumption. Now, they also help by essentially, monitoring usage of these services, managing costs of your usage, and enforcing policies to ensure that there's no sensitive data leaking out to these LLM models, and there are no malicious outputs making their way back into the ecosystem. But the critical difference is, like, while API gateways focus on API calls, AI gateways are generally token aware, which essentially is critical because of the fact that most AI services are charged by token usage. So these AI gateways help you allocate token budgets per application calling them and monitor that spend in real time. They also provide additional capabilities. You can add intelligence to routing, dynamically selecting the best LLM provider based on request type, cost, performance. They also provide you caching capabilities to avoid any redundant callouts going to these LLM providers. So if your strategy doesn't include a way to manage and govern this AI API consumption at this point in time, you will risk a lot of cost overruns and security vulnerabilities, and I would recommend that you look at AI gateways as a tool to solve that. Now let's put a different lens on API consumption. So far, we've all been developing APIs for humans that make conscious decisions when they're using your APIs. But if you're in the same position as me, where your LinkedIn feed is filled with people talking about deploying and managing AI agents, and you're on the verge of deleting LinkedIn altogether, I have bad news for you. Because these AI agents are already here and they are coming for your APIs. And that's why we made this prediction late last year that 30% of all API traffic will soon come from AI agents and not humans. Now, this does have some implications that you need to worry about, because unlike humans, these AI agents don't understand your business context. So they will try and take the fastest route to data or action, even if that means they have to scrape screens to get there, in the absence of an API, of course. Now, even if an API exists and is hard to discover or consume, these agents will most likely bypass them. So that is going to be a challenge. So now you need to rethink your strategy on how do we build and expose APIs with these AI agents as the new breed of consumer in mind. Now, at Gartner, we've long emphasized that consistent API design and development is key to helping our developers, but it's going to be ever so critical for these AI agents. So what do you need to do? What do you need to ensure from your end? I'll give you sort of a high-level checklist that you can take home. Firstly, you need to identify and lock down what data and functionality you need these AI agents to access, right? And ensure, once you have that in mind, that you are providing full API coverage for that, unless you want them to kind of go and screen scrape and use other insecure methods. Secondly, you need to provide standardized machine-readable documentation, which needs to be unambiguous, which is most critical because you don't want these AI agents to misinterpret the context of your API. So this would mean using clear protocols, descriptive status and error codes. So anything that gives you additional context is something that you want to take into account. Limit the API scope, only provide the functionality that these AI agents need to do their work, right? Don't try and bloat your API, because that just confuses these agents and they will take all sorts of wrong actions. As part of the same challenge, you also want to strictly validate your schemas or specifications. Now, this is important, right? Because you don't want these agents kind of triggering malicious outputs or, triggering some accidental attacks or inputting wrong information. So consider adopting API linting capabilities as part of your life cycle to validate your specifications against organizational standards. And last thing, this is probably the most critical of them. Now, even if you throw all your APIs at an LLM, right, we all know that it is non-deterministic by nature. And if you're expecting it to try and execute a sequence of API calls in a predetermined fashion, it's most likely going to fail. So you might want to kind of try and guide it. So consider looking at OpenAPI's Razzo specification, which gives you that additional metadata layer that you can provide to these LLMs to try and execute a bunch of API sequencing calls in a particular sequence and act a little bit more deterministically. Now let's take a look at how AI helps with API management. So far, we mostly focused on the consumption aspects of things, right? AI consuming your APIs, you governing external AI API usage. But I do tend to get a lot of questions from clients on how AI can help with other aspects of lifecycle management. Can it help me plan the APIs I need? Can it help me build the API specifications or the service implementations or the client server code or testing? Now, the short answer to that is, of course, yes, it can. But my assessment is that the market is still not mature enough in the way that these capabilities are consistently provided across all API management vendors. So the capabilities at this point in time vary wildly across all these different vendors. So what does this mean for you? The first thing you need to do is identify and define what your needs are, whether that's accelerating productivity by accelerating development time, whether that's optimizing performance, whether that's help with testing. So once you have those needs defined, you take a look at what your current API management providers are offering, and obviously you try and use that, but wherever they lack is when you try and adopt best of breed tools to provide full coverage, thereby creating this hybrid tool chain. Right now on your screen is a list of representative API management vendors and other vendors that basically provide AI augmented capabilities within this space. Now, this is an area that Gartner tracks extensively, so I'd be happy to kind of just have a follow-on chat with you in case you need any advice, or just see if you are using any of them and how you're getting on with these capabilities. But my key point is, don't be afraid to use multiple tools, because this is in line with the broader API management trend that we're seeing, where we are saying that the future of API management is unbundled, wherein organizations are bringing in best of breed tools where their current API management provider lacks. So you would be doing the right thing by going towards that kind of an ecosystem. Now, another thing that I've constantly observed in a lot of conversations is that there's always a gap in the expectations that a lot of teams have with what they can achieve with these AI tools and the reality of what the tools offer at this point in time. And there's always this narrative as well that maybe we can replace our AI experts now that we have these AI tools. Now, a key point that I would make in response to that, which is fairly obvious, but it's always good to kind of put it down on a chart at this point in time, that if I'm a senior API developer with a good amount of expertise in API development, so if I use these AI tools, I'll probably get pretty productive and pretty fast, right? I would be able to write high quality specifications and code. I can almost be a curator of sorts of what this AI produces at a point in time. But on the flip side, if I'm someone who's very junior, who doesn't really know API development, just starting out, now my over-reliance on these tools can be very risky because I don't know what good looks like, and neither does AI. We have an assumption that it does, but it's more like a junior developer itself. You need to coach it, you need to train it, you need to validate what it produces. So what I'm trying to say is, don't be in a rush to try and get rid of API experts or expertise, even as these tools evolve. Now let's come to the last section on how some of these emerging AI-specific protocols are changing API strategies as well. Now, unless you've been stuck in the mountains since November 2024 with no access to internet whatsoever, which might not be a bad idea if you ask me, you probably would have heard about some of these protocols that you see on the screen, and the most likely of them being Model Context Protocol, or MCP. Now, MCP is one in a list of a bewildering array of protocols that are emerging to simplify agentic consumption. But the way I like to kind of break this space down is there are essentially just two types of protocols at this point in time. You see the horizontal ones, inter-agent-oriented protocols. Now, these are emerging to basically simplify communication and task delegation between AI agents. Now, Google's A2A is an example of that. There's also other protocols from Cisco and Agency coming through as well. Now, key thing to bear in mind, right? There's probably few to none organizations at this point in time that are operating a network of agents that need to communicate with each other. So my point is that the race for this adoption, right, this protocol adoption hasn't even begun yet, to be honest. Now, the actual momentum is in this vertical space that we call as context-oriented protocols, because I feel that it's more grounded in today's reality. It's trying to solve a problem that exists today, which is how do we get these AI agents to the data and information that they need in a standardized fashion? Now, MCP is one example of that, and I think the momentum behind MCP is unlike anything I've ever seen in my analyst career so far. And I think the reason for that is because there's a lot of client interest in it, but I won't say that it's already become the de facto standard. The reason for that is the questions that I'm receiving are mostly exploratory, like what is MCP, what is the rate of adoption looking like? So that leads me to believe that there's obviously that hype, but the adoption hasn't quite caught up yet. Right? So now, how does this relate to APIs essentially, Rao? Now, if I'm an AI agent developer trying to build out an AI agent essentially, right, trying to get it access to data or information, the way that it is done today is by tool calling or function calling, and each AI agent developer platform or framework I use will have its own native way of registering and calling out to these tools. So I would need to write some custom integrations or custom connections to be able to integrate each and every interface that comes through, essentially. Now, MCP kind of simplifies this a little because it standardizes this consumption in a more platform agnostic fashion, right? So any tool can kind of try and come and consume it if it supports MCP. So it's an open standard by that norm. And I, as an AI agent developer, don't have to do all that heavy lifting in my code itself. I can just point out to the MCP server and it basically gets the job done for me. Now, bear in mind that MCP is not just a wrapper on APIs. It can also wrap file systems, databases, websites, depending on what the context is. So you do need to strategically design your MCP interfaces for them to be truly useful. But I won't get into the design aspects today. I think there was a brilliant session from Srini and Sai earlier on that. But what I would like to focus more on is the fact that if you're moving towards a world where we are going to be exposing more and more MCP servers, essentially, for these AI agents to consume, we are going to run into the same governance challenges of access control and discoverability like we did with APIs. So my key point to this is that successful MCP adoption requires governance just like successful API adoption did. The good news, however, is that the principles of API management are very relevant to this, and you should definitely be applying them to this particular type of adoption. So essentially, what do you need? You basically need a gateway to manage access control to these MCP interfaces. You need like a portal of sorts to discover all these MCP servers and interfaces. You need an analytics mechanism to try and identify usage of these different MCP interfaces. And you need lifecycle management to manage the dependencies so you don't break consumers or your AI agents. And the market is already started to reflect this pattern. You're seeing the emergence of MCP gateways coming through. You see Solo, Kong, Gravity, Lasso, all these other vendors kind of providing that. There's an official MCP registry that's come through as well, and there are numerous MCP marketplaces coming through. So bear in mind that MCP, rather than treating it as something entirely new, just view it as an extension of your API strategy, just another protocol that you need to cater for as part of your API strategy. You already have the standards in there, the base in there, you're just developing on top of it. And don't forget, underneath everything, as agents start consuming MCP interfaces, you need to manage them just like you managed APIs, right? And that would also mean that you will need to add any more mediation layers to wrap systems and services that weren't built to speak MCP, right? Like you see in this chart, where you have a composite service kind of being exposed as an integration server as well. Now, just to kind of wrap things up, right, I would just try and highlight some of my recommendations. I think the first thing to bear in mind is that you need to rethink your API strategy from a consumption perspective. Focus on the external AI API consumption aspects, maybe leverage AI gateways to kind of manage that side of the house. And rethink how you're designing your APIs right now because of the fact that these AI agents are more than reality right now and they are going to be coming for those APIs. So you need to rethink how you kind of build them out. Secondly, definitely explore AI augmented capabilities within API management platforms and other platforms, but don't overlook the limitations at this point in time. Human expertise is still pretty paramount in all of this, so don't try and replace any of that expertise even if these tools evolve. Thirdly, we are at the beginning of a protocol revolution, and MCP would probably emerge as like the de facto standard, just like OpenAPI became for APIs. So now is the question to ask, how will we adopt MCP in an enterprise setting? Because that's something that we're still not seeing. More importantly, how will we govern it? And the principles of API management are going to be your best friends there. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you found some value in the session.
Thanks a lot for that It's very, very insightful and a lot of information. Any questions?
So, thank you. Shrey, talk about security,
Yeah.
right, in the context of AI or in the context of agentic. I'm curious to know what Gartner thinks, is necessary to sort of build a security framework around AI. I
Yeah.
mean, I assume probably they're going to be aligned in the context of your APIs, but do you have a perspective that's different from the usual Gisafita?
Yeah, it's going to be broader than that because now it depends on who's building this stuff out. Now we are seeing teams emerge in organizations which are just focused on AI. So they are looking at broadly the TRISM aspects of AI and with security embedded. Now, there are obviously aspects, if you are the API strategy people in there, you have to look at AI gateways as a security mechanism, you have to look at MCP gateways as a security mechanism, and you will definitely have those guardrails within the API management platforms coming through as well. So I would say you need to kind of see what your current API management vendors are providing in that context. We are seeing that role-based access control also kind of getting involved into tool-based access control. So all those capabilities will kind of emerge and evolve as the market kind of matures a little, right? Uh, Not right now. It is something that we mention in our research, but I won't say that people have reached a position right now in their strategies where they've already started using all of this.
Any other questions?
Hi, this is Arul. So I just want to know about you are saying this two agents interagent protocols, right? So when it happens, that what is the use of it? Can I get that some real time example?
Yeah, sure. Now, for example, now if you've kind of created a couple of different agents, right? They may be on different platforms, they may be on the same platforms. Now, you may have a use case where an AI agent needs to delegate a task to some other agent, right, that's been built, or needs to communicate with that agent to get some information essentially. So that's where that A2A protocol is emerging to try and solve that particular aspect, right? So if I come back to this slide, not sure if my pointer would come through. So as you can see, these are these three different agents here, agent 1, agent 2, agent 3. Now they both need to talk to each other. Even individually, they all have access to their information through MCP, but now they need to talk to each other to exchange some kind of information or delegate a task. That's where A2A comes into the picture. But as I suggested, right, we are seeing very little amount of organizations right now at a maturity level where they've kind of gone towards this space. So first try and get this kind of layer right, and then you can kind of start thinking about going towards the A2A space. I would think that A2A would probably emerge as the winner, although there are like 14, 15 different protocols in the agent communication space. Some of them will merge, some of them will die away, I guess, but I think A2A is where most of the momentum is from that particular space.
So it's not load balancing, right?
No, it's not local.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So, if a company wants to invest in any of these AI platforms, which provide these gateway services, like they're open to options, what would you suggest?
What would I
Which
say?
platforms are ahead now?
So the first thing I would recommend is see what API management providers you have. Most of them are providing AI gateways out of the box. Even if you look at, if you're invested in hyperscalers, they have a way to implement that AI gateway pattern. You probably don't need to buy any existing additional stuff out of the box. So I think the first port of call needs to be what existing technology you have. Have they evolved their offering into an AI gateway? If you have that, well and good. If you don't have that, there are also security vendors in this space, right? F5 and Akamai and Cloudflare that are also providing these capabilities. So that would be your second port of call, essentially. But what I would say is there's a lot of vendor AI washing going on at the moment. And I think vendors are more considering the fact that they want to invest into AI capabilities, whether you want it or not. So it's going to be coming anyway. So you need to decide which platform is the more suitable for us.
Anything like a magic quadrant you have?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, it's not part of this session today, but we do have a magic quadrant. It's not for AI gateways. We will eventually build that. We just have mostly for API management and integration platform as a service. But the Magic Quadrant, the way it works is that there needs to be enough hype around a particular market and enough adoption for us to consider a Magic Quadrant. For example, if I look at iPaaS as a Magic Quadrant, the inclusion criteria that we have is that the vendor needs to be making at least 60, 70 million in revenue per year. I would say that's possibly not a thing right now with AI gateways.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, if you have further questions, you can definitely find Shrey in the hallways and continue your conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again, Shrey.